The ego is bad. Wrong. In mainstream spirituality, there is this concept that the ego is bad. Anybody who is selfish has an ego, and vice versa. This leads to a place where people are not able to tend to their own needs because of the fear of being called selfish. And I am here to say why this is wrong, and why the people who are in line with this school of thought are actually missing out on a massive opportunity for spiritual growth. But let's first start to define the ego. The ego is actually the intermediary between the lower self and the higher self. The ego has the role of integrating both of these energies and expressing them in a correct manner. And to further understand the ego, let's first look at how it rises into our awareness through the birth of autonomy. When an infant is first born, they show large amounts of empathy. You know, when their parent gets angry, the baby gets angry too. This shows signs of unity consciousness where the infant's will is non-existent and he sees his mother and himself as one. This was coined the symbiotic stage by Margaret Mallard. In this stage, the child is largely dependent on the parent to make decisions for him and is constantly seeking validation from the parent to know whether what they're doing is right or wrong. This stage highlights the development of the root and sacral chakra. The root chakra is largely concerned with survival and tapping into the body, while the sacral chakra is more about learning another dimension of the body, which is emotions. But once the child reaches 18 months, he will start to develop a sense of autonomy. After learning about his body, needs, and his desires, it is only natural for the child to learn to differentiate between his own needs and the needs of others. Developing this sense of self is essential to the child's survival and acceptance within the group, as it allows him to execute his needs and desires on his own behalf. And now looking deeper into today's society, it is almost obvious how people have no clear distinction between their own needs and desires. A lot of people feel bad for the way they feel. There's a lot of shame and guilt in today's day and age. But if we get to look at this even from the mainstream spirituality point of view, think about a person who has no clear understanding of his or her emotions, and then you insert mainstream spirituality telling them that they should abandon their desires, that these earthly desires and needs are not needed for spiritual transcendence. So then this will amplify this situation where people start to bypass their reality through spirituality. The spiritual bypassing leads to a situation where there's a lot of people who don't recognize the importance of the inner work. One must understand that you have to build from the ground up. You have to build up through the root, the sacral, the solar plexus, and then the heart chakra. And so ego development is actually a task that the solar plexus chakra is concerned with. The solar plexus chakra does not start to develop up until 18 months of age. This stage is essential for the child to understand himself as a cause, as him being responsible for the things around him. He now then stops to depend so much on his parents for his decision making. In fact, he starts to develop himself as a separate being. The strong ego then serves the following functions. First, as a filter for the instinctive drives of the lower self. Second, as a divider between the unconscious and the conscious. And thirdly, as the integrating agent for the shadow. So the ego serves as a filter in a way that it chooses which kinds of instinctive drives get expressed and also how they get expressed. For example, as a child develops his ego, he might learn that violence is not the best way to express his anger. The ego is then the barrier also for the conscious and the unconscious. It chooses what is shown and also chooses what is not shown. And to have a strong ego means to have a strong ability to handle the unconscious forces within you. It is no wonder why some people even experience schizophrenic episodes after taking psychedelics. Those who have a weak ego tend to not be able to deal with the unconscious in the right way. Why? Because they have not been able to understand the forces within them, and also they have not been able to differentiate between what is themselves and what is the unconscious. And now that we recognize that the ego is the boundary and the filter between the unconscious and the conscious, one will then lead to understand that the ego also serves as the creator of the shadow. Why? Because whatever is chosen to not be expressed then gets repressed into the shadow realm. But the good news here is that a strong ego also serves as an integrating force between the shadow and what is conscious. So those who develop a strong sense of self and a strong ego can then learn to integrate the shadow into a healthier expression of the self. And so now the ego can then serve both as a separator, but also a harmonizer. So take the time to create the foundation and the structure of who you are. Develop your ego, develop your sense of self, because you will use that as a platform to serve those around you. Now, if you're curious about how you can go about doing this, I created this video that is basically a map to the path that will lead you to naturally develop your ego and your sense of self. All right, so that's all I got for you guys today. Remember, stay lucid, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.